This episode of the George Poulos podcast is brought to you by my merch. We just dropped the Love hats in corduroy. This is a beautiful, stunning embroidered cap. It's a brown corduroy dad style hat with a big, beautiful love design with flowers embroidered on the front. This is my favorite hat now. I've been wearing it all the time. I'm really excited with how it came out. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see me wearing it throughout this episode. You can support this podcast by buying a hat at georgepoulos.com/store. I much appreciate your support. Now let's get into the episode. Welcome back to the George Poulos podcast. This is a place of mindfulness, so as we get into this episode, I encourage you to just notice whether you're present with what you're doing. Whether you're actually sitting down and intentionally listening to this podcast or maybe watching it on YouTube, or if you are playing this in your earphones while you're doing something else, ask yourself, are you present with what you're doing? Because a lot of the times we're actually kind of on autopilot and we're performing tasks, but while we're performing those tasks, we're somewhere else in our head. We're running along these thought pattern narratives and we're just quite literally somewhere else. We're not present. So I encourage you, and this is something that I do every time I sit down to record this podcast, I just take a moment to get here. What I mean by that is notice physically where I am. I'm personally here in my room. What are you doing? Notice where you are. Notice if you are somewhere else in your mind. And if you can, try to bring yourself to this present moment, right? The voice you hear, my voice, it's just coming into your consciousness at this present moment. Isn't it fascinating? Sometimes I think about this a lot. I'll catch myself doing something and I'm like, wait a damn minute. How did I get here? Like, if I really think about it, my whole life in the past that brought me to this point right here, this present moment where I'm sitting in this chair recording this podcast, that whole past is out of my control now, right? If I'm just right here, I'm just right here. I don't know how I got here. This is just the moment that I'm in, right? And it's, I like thinking in those terms because it for me, it connects me to this deeper idea that, whoa, yeah, like this sense of control that we feel like we're in perfect control of our lives. Like if I do X, Y, and Z, then I will get to X, Y, and Z. There's something deeper going on. And if you completely release your sense of control, you'll still end up in a present moment, in present moment after present moment. This idea that we are in total control, and if I manipulate my life and if I manipulate the world in this way, then I'm going to get to this specific place I want to go. Actually, like look at where you are. How the fuck did you get here? Was it really totally your control? When I think about my life, it's like, especially now that I'm in a place of surrender, it's like, okay, I've got this room in New York City. I've got this podcast. I'm in these relationships. It's summer. Was it really me? Was it really my ego, my conscious thought, my planning that brought me to this exact place? No. There's a major element of like, this is just what happened. And, you know, something I think about a lot is like, okay, maybe you could reason and come to the belief that I can, you know, decide to take certain actions. I can decide to record these podcasts and post them on the internet. But my interest, my intrigue, my curiosity, my enthusiasm for recording this podcast, for saying these specific things, was that in my control? Or did that depend on my upbringing, all the scenarios I found myself in throughout life, the teachers and the readings I came across, and it's like there's a deeper thing going on, and I enjoy that perspective because then it's like I'm right here. This actually is everything. This actually is everything. I'm trying to be more fearless with what I say on this podcast. I was taking a gander at the old episodes, and it's really interesting to watch my sort of confidence increasing as I've recorded these episodes. You know, maybe 10 to 20 episodes back, these episodes were exclusively on Patreon. I also noticed like towards like the very beginning, episodes 1 through 5, maybe I was, really speaking in this performative kind of YouTuber content creator voice. My interpretation of that now is that I thought I needed to put on this performance in order to gain acceptance from the outside world, from the algorithm, from other people, etc. I've really, my journey has been live, actively unfolding through this podcast. And it's really, I think it's very cool that I can look back and see my progress. And that thought, something I still deal with, although I'm working through this as well, is just fear of what's coming out on the podcast. Because when I sit here, I really enter a state of let go, and words just come right out. And I've shared this before, but my ego can get very fearful of what words are coming out, right? Because the ego is used to calculating and controlling the image of self. But when these words are just coming out freely, I'm losing that control, and my ego freaks out a little bit. Like, a lot of things come out that aren't, lined up with what the society wants or expects. So it's natural for the ego to panic about that. But I'm trying to really embrace that let go, because I think the more I let go, the more I become a channel for something deeper. The more I surrender, I think the more, when I'm in a state of surrender, the more important, the more real, the more honest, the more raw, the more authentic my speaking is. And that's got to be what's the most helpful for the listeners out there. There's no way. I'm past the point of believing that what my ego thinks I should say would be the most useful to the world. I really am coming into this belief that, no, actually, the more I let go, that's how I will be able to say what is the most useful for the world, for my listeners, for myself, right? This podcast has also been a journey of self-acceptance and showing myself it's safe to let go, and showing myself that my spiritual learnings are valid, and this is indeed the direction I want to push into. And it's been cool to see that progress unfold along this podcast. And something I still deal with is I'm getting pretty good at letting go when I'm sitting here and speaking. But then when I'm editing, I'll start to second guess myself. I'll start to analyze whether what I said was too crazy, whether people will like what I said, right? But it's interesting, right? Like, if I took a fearless approach, the radical ideas would just come out freely, and it's like, who am I to even judge whether these ideas coming out of me are right or wrong? It's very freeing to actually understand that my creativity is not me. I think this is something that holds back a lot of artists, and it's certainly held me back during the prior phase of my career as a content creator when I was making the skate videos. Is I thought my creativity was a reflection of who I am, right? So I wanted to make sure every video was good. Like, I wanted to, I think that's the best way I could say it. I wanted every one of those skate videos I made to be good. I wanted them to hit. I wanted people to like them. But that made it so that when I was in the spontaneous act of creating, there was always this voice in my head judging the output, right? So in my view now, that's actually the ego preventing your best creativity from coming out. So this idea of letting go, completely letting go of the outcome, right? Not thinking about how this podcast is going to feel or how people are going to like it when it comes out. No, it's about this moment, right? It's about this moment where, again, bringing it back to the beginning, where I'm sitting here and I'm very, very present. And what comes out in a state of presence is it packs way more of a punch than what you're calculating and what you think you should say, right? Every action comes out of the present, whether you've been anxious about it and planned it and thought it through or not. Every action comes out of the present. There's this idea in that I think I picked up from Buddhism that when you bring yourself to the present and when you're acting spontaneously in the present moment, your action is very, very, very effective. It's very, very on point because you're not missing. You're responding to the only thing there is. The only thing there is the present moment. So when you're responding to that, instead of some calculation your mind is making, that is the most effective action you could take, right? So that was a little rant. It's interesting to observe these tendencies of mine. This, in a way, this podcast is an active form of meditation, and I hope you all can see that I actually work through shit actively, real time through this podcast. And I notice my fears arising, and I hope you can see that when my fear arises as I'm recording this podcast, I don't just grasp onto it and let that fear take me, right? I stay right here, heart-centered, and I watch the fear and I introspect about it, right? That's a big lesson that I try to teach on this podcast. When fear, anxiety, some sort of crisis arises, you don't have to get sucked right into it, even though that is the ego temptation. That's the default ego reaction. Is something fearful arises, freak out, panic, go right into that fear, let it take you for a roller coaster ride. There is a way to enter the seat of the roller coaster and go on that ride, but you're aware the whole time that, okay, I'm fine this whole way through. I'm good. I'm watching this thing happen. And I'm learning from it and I'm growing from it. So it's very interesting to, at this moment in time, be, sitting here aware of this present moment. I'm aware of all these podcast episodes I did in the past, and I'm aware of all these podcast episodes that may happen in the future. And I'm aware that I'm at this particular phase of the journey. Here's another thing that I've been thinking about. Sometimes I have fear about what I say on this podcast because I'm aware that I'm not totally done learning yet, right? I'm very much on an unfolding journey, and everything I just shared is an example of that, right? I'm still dealing with my own fear, my own self-consciousness. I'm not totally egoless right now, right? So there's this fear, what if I'm saying the wrong things? But I have to speak from my heart now. I can't try to access this all-knowing place because I'm not there yet. I'm exactly where I am. And if I speak authentically, honestly, purely from this present moment, then I'm saying a very real thing about this particular part of the journey. So it's almost like I have an obligation to be honest because this is the truth that I can access right now. And the fear, the hesitation that maybe I shouldn't speak, maybe I shouldn't try to help people, maybe I shouldn't try to create until I know it all, is going to just make me clam up and be quiet. And I'm never going to get there because that's a perfectionist mindset. It's right, if I was scared to do the podcast at all, I wouldn't be able to see that journey. I wouldn't be able to access that insight that I had back then on the journey when I was dealing with those particular fears. Now that I've overcome those particular fears, here I am. Now I have new fears and I can address those as I'm going through them. So this is very much an actively unfolding journey. And I am starting to see myself as a teacher on this podcast. I think this is a form of teaching, but it's very much a form of teaching where I am also fully aware that I'm a student. I'm very much still learning these lessons as we go. And the very act of me teaching about what I've learned is actually also a way for me to reinforce what I've learned. I'm a right? I'm a young man. I'm not a sage. I'm very much learning this stuff, and in choosing to kind of take a teacher role while I haven't fully gotten there is helping me learn faster. And I don't want to be afraid about saying the wrong things, because that's going to make me clam up and that's going to hinder my learning. So this is a big fear that comes up a lot on this podcast, is like what I just shared. Like, what if I say something that isn't quite right? But that's why it's important to understand that this is a learning process for me too, and we are actually learning together. And an example where this came up was the monogamy episode, right? Monogamy is so ingrained. I'm having this spiritual journey with monogamy. I'm having all these realizations, but there's a lot of fear that I'm wrong. Like, what if I am wrong? And I could be wrong, right? Like, maybe monogamy is the best way to find an enlightened love. Like, who knows? I'm only where I'm at on my journey. I don't have the bird's eye yet, but I don't like the idea of trying to wait until you know it all. I feel like that can only hold us back in this life. It's like, no, like I don't know. Like, I could die. I don't know when I'm going to die. It could happen next week. Wouldn't it be sad if I just clammed up and didn't share what I'm going through because of this fear that I haven't totally figured it out? It's like, no, the journey does not end. The teaching and the learning does not end. So there should be no place for self-consciousness here. That should be very clear to all my listeners, that I'm on the journey too, right? I'm very much on the journey too, and this is an active unfolding. I'm not sitting up on a pedestal. I'm on the ground with you, trying to figure it all out, right? So there's nothing. And I think this is the kind of energy that's being cultivated as I'm reading the comments. Right. It's never, we should all get past the place of like egos fighting other egos, right? Like, this podcast is not my ego trying to assert itself as being correct. This podcast is my spirit trying to come out. It's the truth that I know deep inside trying to come out after being clouded by ego for so many years. So, if I ever like quote unquote slip up and some like ego shit comes out, some shit comes out of my past patterns and conditionings as opposed to out of my authentic heart, that's part of the thing. So what I'm doing here is a long-winded way of convincing myself that it's safe, that I'm safe to let it all go when I sit down and record this podcast and be a pure channel of honesty. Because I think that's what's going to be the most helpful for you, and I think that's what's going to be the most helpful for me. And I want to embody what I'm learning, and I'm right. Like, I want to be someone who tells the truth, not in an ego way. I just want to be a channel for truth, not to be better than anyone. It's just I'm learning that I should tell the truth. So as I sit here, I actually want to tell the truth. I want to embody who I'm becoming, right? Someone asked me on Instagram, so are you saying you shouldn't have goals? Find it hard to tie this into building my business. And allow me to speak from my own experience. I have dropped goals, right? I have no goals anymore. The problem with goals is that they're out there in the future, right? So goals, in my view, for me, right? For me, goals take me out of truth because they put me into the future. They take me out of the present goals cause me to desire something that I do not yet have, right? So growing up, I was all about goals, right? Because of my Western conditioning. When I was in high school, I had to try really hard to get good grades because the goal was to get into a good college. When I was in college, I had to get really good grades because the goal was to get a good job after college, right? In that way, goals are very dangerous because they're constantly putting you into the future. And once you reach your goal, another goal comes up. So if you're operating on the basis of goals, I think there is a dangerous trap there. And the trap is that you are perpetually missing the present moment because you have a goal, you're working towards it, you're looking at the future, your present action is not based on the present spontaneous moment. Your present action is based on trying to get somewhere else. But once you get there, there's usually a new goal, so then you're already trying to get to that new goal. There's no opportunity for rest, right? So you're going to have to come to this one when you're ready for it. I know that in our Western society, the idea of letting go of goals might sound crazy or insane to many of you, but I was a goal-oriented person for most of my life, and in my opinion, it led to nothing but misery. It led to perpetually missing the present moment. You can't really enjoy the present moment if you've got a big goal in your head because you're trying to get there, right? The goal, the very concept of a goal, it's in the future, right? It's not right here. And it's interesting and it's nuanced, right? Because I still have desires, right? Like I have this like vision of myself in a different apartment, maybe living with my lover, where I feel like where my creative studio space enables me to create more freely, where I really feel at peace in myself, right? So you could call that a goal, but see, goals just work differently. Now it's more like that feels like a flash of a vision from my higher self. And I'm very careful not to put myself in a place where I'm just waiting for that to manifest. Because if you're waiting for a goal to come true, or if you're taking all your actions in order to hit some ideal in the future, you're back to missing the present moment. It's like there is a way that a goal or a vision can exist here now, but you have to be very careful, right? I remember this because this is something I'm going through. Like I think I kind of want to move to a different apartment with my partner. And I remember I was in a place where like I became bummed out about my current situation. And that's like manifestation 101. Like if you think that you're going to feel better when you get some certain thing in the future, you're missing the present moment, and you're actually hindering your ability to manifest that thing. I've been thinking about manifesting a lot, so I'll share this. Like the way to go in that situation is think about what it is you think you will feel when you have that apartment or when you have that thing that you want to manifest. What is it that you want to feel? You want to feel at peace. You want to feel at home. You want to feel creatively free. You want to feel abundant. You want to feel loving. You want to feel loved. Everything you can identify that you think you will have when you reach that goal, explore how you can have it right here, right now. That is how you, in my opinion, transcend goals, right? Because goals give you the illusion that you will obtain these desirable feelings out there in the future. That's the whole mistake that was made when we were conditioned, is we were taught that happiness is out there in the future. it forces you to perpetually miss happiness because you're stuck doing things and grinding and hustling and trying to manipulate things in order to finally get that happiness. But because of how we were conditioned, it's impossible to reach that happiness, right? Like, you can't be happy in high school because you're grinding so you can get to college. You can't be happy in college because you're grinding so that you can get a good job. And then it goes on and on and on. You know, you could climb the corporate ladder. That's one example. Or you could, this trap exists no matter what your way of life is. You could be self-employed and then you're just grinding for more and more and more money, right? You think that when you have more money, then you'll feel at peace. Then you feel like you can do the things you want to do. No. Whenever you have a goal where you think that out there, once I get that goal, that's when I'll feel happy. That's when I'll feel peaceful. That's when I'll feel abundant. You got to scrap that. You got to identify those feelings that you're waiting for and come right here and meditate and figure out, why aren't you feeling those things right now? Because I promise you, you already have everything you want. And you have to drop the attachment to the specific things, right? So if it's you think you'll be happy when you have that apartment. You think you'll be happy when you have that lover. You think you'll be happy when you have that certain amount of money. You have to get out of that trap because it's never going to end. It's never going to end no matter how much money you finally have and manifest. You're just going to put another goalpost out there. So it's extremely important to let go of goals. It's essential for happiness. I can't fucking tell you how my life has transformed since I let go of goals, right? I don't have a goal. People look at me like I'm crazy when I tell them, I've let go of my skate channel. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm working on this podcast, and they're like, "Oh, like what are your plans with it? Like, how are you going to monetize?" I'm like, you know what? I'm actually not thinking about that at all. I'm doing the podcast because it comes out of me in the present moment. People look at me like I'm crazy, but I've actually never been happier. And like I was saying earlier, this makes it so that this podcast is true. There's no calculation happening of how it should go. There's a utter openness, right? So this podcast is coming out dramatically differently than how it would come out if I had a goal for the podcast. If I had a goal to have a certain amount of listeners by the end of the year, then I would be controlling and calculating my output in order to reach that goal. That is not surrender. That's ego getting in the way of your true power, right? So with business, yeah, I would also let go of goals. The thing is that your intuition will guide you. Your intuition will guide you. People are afraid to let go of goals, and they're afraid to let go of their obsession with the future because there's a fear that you're going to become a bum. There's a fear that you're just going to lay in bed all day and do nothing. The truth is, your intuition is not telling you to lay in bed all day and do nothing. Your intuition has a drive, a passion, an endless fire. Your intuition has an endless fire. When you let go of the future outcomes, when you let go of the goals, when you let go of waiting for the money to come and waiting for the right lover to come and waiting for the apartment to come, when you drop all the specific outcomes that you feel like you need to have for some reason, and when you come into the present moment, your intuition takes over. And I promise you, your intuition does not want you to lie in bed all day. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it does. In my case, once or twice a week, my intuition does want me to lie in bed all day. But having surrendered my goals, maybe you can feel it as I record this podcast. My intuition is on fire. It is fueling me in a way that I've never felt before. Back when I was recording the skate videos, when they were more calculated, when my ego was really in the way of my creativity, when my ego wanted to control the output of my creativity, recording those videos was very draining to me. Now that I've surrendered everything and I'm just letting my intuition take over, it's an energy source that I did not know was fathomable, right? So I'm not saying like, okay, let's say you drop goals and surrender to your intuition with this business that you brought up in your question. it could be revealed to you. Your intuition could reveal to you that that business is not for you, right? So I'm not saying that that particular business will be successful, though maybe it will. If your intuition is what got you into that business instead of your ego, then letting go of the ego, letting go of the goals is going to be the best thing you could do for that business. But you have to, again, drop the attachment to specific outcomes. You can't be attached to this business or this apartment or this kind of relationship. When you surrender all that, you get the right business, the right partnership, the right apartment. Did I just repeat myself? You get the right job. When you drop your attachment to specific outcomes, let your intuition take over. That specific outcome you're attached to may not be the right one for you. So you allow your intuition to take over, and it's going to guide you to something better than your ego could have possibly imagined. That goes for career, relationship, living situation, you name it, anything you can think of. If you drop the idea of how you think it has to go specifically, what you're doing when you drop that idea is you're getting your ego out of the way and you're becoming open to the universe, and you're going to connect to something that actually energizes you. I've experienced this in business before. I've gotten into business partnerships where soon after starting to work on the business, my intuition was just starting to throw up red flags, and I listened and I got out of there, and it's okay, technically that business failed, but now I'm doing something that I'm extremely passionate about, and putting energy into this is paradoxically energizing, right? When you use your energy according to your intuition, it is paradoxically energizing. Your energy doesn't get drained when you use your energy according to your intuition. Your energy only gets drained when you suppress your intuition and you use your energy on something that your ego thinks you have to use it on, right? So always surrender to your intuition, because you tap into an energy reserve that if you're in your ego right now, you cannot even fathom how much energy you have. Okay, here's a question that just came in on YouTube. How do you deal with bad energy around you? All my life, I've been putting people before me and only recently started noticing the patterns. How do I help a friend who's being negative? He's frustrated, angry, whatever, and not be affected by that negativity. I have such a big desire to help, to hug everyone I love who's hurt, even people I don't know very well. I have this pain when I can't help them. I wish I could tell them exactly how I went through what they went through and make them feel better. Okay, so I addressed a similar question in episode 22. So if you really want to explore this topic, feel free to get into that episode after this. But let's see what response comes out today. And my response is just going to be where I'm at right now. Again, like I just went through, not claiming that this is the most enlightened answer, but this is where I'm at right now. And where I'm at right now is I have to be very careful with negative energy. So I'm so deep in my spirituality and my access to spiritual truths that a lot of the times when someone is going through something and they're being negative, like they're going through some depression, they're going through some shit, a lot of the times I will instantaneously feel like I know exactly how they can get through this. And I have a temptation to share my spiritual insights with them in order to help them, right? So I think it's similar to what you're talking about. You have a friend who's going through some shit, some mental health shit. They're angry, frustrated, maybe depressed, and you feel like you see what's going on and you want to help them. You want to offer them that truth so that they can get better. The problem with that is a lot of people are actually attached to their suffering. The thing that they're suffering through, well, that's on the one hand, right? On the one hand, a lot of people are attached to their suffering. So when you try to help them through it, they're going to take that as a threat to their self, right? On the other hand, a lot of people are simply just not ready for the spiritual angle, right? A lot of people are so deep in the ego doo-doo that they think they need to manipulate and control their way out of it. They're just not, the spiritual perspective will not even penetrate a single layer of the ego that they have put up to protect their sense of self, right? So where I'm at now, and I've heard a lot of different Ram Dass lectures that confirmed this belief that was bubbling inside of me, is that it's actually better for me to just keep quiet, right? And it's better for me to protect my energy, because I'm also someone, right? I'm not, another episode you should check out is the episode on inner peace, right? This is an episode all about how if we're purely at inner peace, if we're like in a more enlightened state, the negativity of others around us is not going to penetrate our spirit, right? But I'm in a place, right, where I'm also on a budding spiritual awakening. So if I exchange too much energy with people who are deep in ego, deep in an ego depression, it can actually drain on me. It can pull me out of my spirit and make me feel that negativity. So sometimes the best thing for me to do is be quiet. Sometimes the best thing for me to do is actually even increase my space from that person. Sometimes I just can't handle it, right? Because I'm past the people pleasing now. I cannot sacrifice myself in order to be there for somebody, especially somebody who's not ready to accept my help, right? Because I do know how to help people a lot of the times, but if they're not ready for it, like what am I going to do? Just sit there and take that negativity? And it's like where I'm at, it's like I have to increase the space. Like I have to leave the situation and leave the negativity, because at this point with my awareness of spiritual truth, it's irresponsible for me to allow a friend to continue to spew this, what I believe is a totally incorrect view of them that's perpetuating their own suffering. I can't, right? If I can't get through to them, if they're not asking and open to my help, I can't just sit there and listen to the negativity, because it's bringing my energy down. It's bringing my vibration down. And also if I sit there and listen, I'm like, that feels like me like validating their perspective, and I just can't. That feels irresponsible. That feels unhelpful. That feels like me actually playing a role in the perpetuation of their own suffering. So if someone is going through something and they are closed off to my help, I can't participate anymore. I just can't do it. And that's my dharma right now, right? Like that's because of what I'm capable of, because of my particular place on the spiritual journey. I need to keep quiet in those situations, because trying to convince someone of the spiritual truths that is really just a brand new belief for me, trying to convince someone who is not ready to be convinced, who's going to fight me on it, who's going to assert their ego view of their own suffering, it's going to drag me down, and that's not where I'm supposed to go right now. So you need to listen for where you're at. If you're capable of holding space for that person and you believe in your heart it's going to be helpful for them to hold space, even if they're closed off to the spiritual view of things, then you should follow that. But like what my heart tells me in these kinds of situations is that I can't really be around it. I can't really, like, I don't even want it entering my, I don't even want it entering my, my energy field. It's right. And it's case by case, right? Like in the episode about inner peace, I described how I was woken up by fighting outside, right? That was a negative vibration coming my way, but it's not so like direct, right? It has nothing to do with me, right? So that was an easy one for me to just remain at peace, remain in a high vibration, and allow the negativity to go on out there. And it wasn't, the negative vibrations were not penetrating my aura, right? But in the case of someone who's actually like, in a way, they're like requesting my energy because they want to vent and be negative around me. And they right? Like a lot of people are looking for some sort of validation to their own suffering. In that sort of scenario, it's like I'm actually like involved, like the vibrations are mingling. So that has the capacity to drag me down. And that's what I can't handle right now, right? And I don't think that's selfish. I think that's tuning into your dharma. That's tuning into your heart. That's you following what you feel is the most helpful. In those particular situations where a friend or a lover wants to vent, but they're completely closed off to my perspective, I need to really tune into my heart and I need to, it's very nuanced, right? Like I could hold space for a bit, but if it hits a point where it's starting to bring me down and making me depressed, there often comes a time where I can't be involved. And that's what my heart tells me is the best thing I can do, right? And the other thing, there's a problem with calculating morality with your ego and calculating what's the right thing that I should do. Because your ego might tell you that in order to be a good friend, I have to sit there, take this negativity, even though it drags me down. It's like, to be a good friend, I have to do that, right? That's the ego calculation of how do I make sure I'm a good friend. But when you tune into your heart, if you refuse to accept someone's bullshit, right? That could be the good thing for them in the long run. They might think you're a bad friend in that moment, but, you know, they might come to understand that you have a higher view of these things and that you actually do want to help them, but that they're, right? It's like, have faith in people. That ego calculation of what we're supposed to do to help somebody, I don't think is always the most effective, right? It comes back again to what I spoke about at the beginning. If you're there in that situation with that friend who's being negative, you have to respond authentically from the present. And if your heart is telling you you can't take the negativity anymore, and that friend is not listening to your advice or they don't want it, and they are digging themselves deeper into a hole, and if your heart is telling you that your presence is not being helpful, then, you know, it's okay. You can drop the ego calculation of what you think you need to do to be a good and helpful friend. Your intuition knows what it's doing. Your intuition knows better than your ego can what's going to be best for you and what's going to be best for them. And in general, in my experience with relationships, what's best for you, even if you feel like it's temporarily bruising their ego, is always what's best for them as well. I've had many situations where this happened. A lot of the situations are where I want to be honest about something, but I'm afraid it's going to hurt their ego. 100% of the time, if I'm honest about it and they get their ego bruised, but we work through it, we both come to this greater and higher understanding, right? And right, there's this concept that Ram Dass has shared, and it's called a truth relationship. A truth relationship is a very rare relationship where both parties want to tell the truth no matter what, even if it bruises the other's ego, right? If you think about your relationships, just envision them. How many of them can you tell the truth 100%? Like if you could you tell anything? Could you show your raw self to that person? Could you be your honest, authentic self 100%? Let's say you have a plan with them, and at the last minute, your intuition is throwing red flags and you just know you can't be there. Will you tell the truth or will you suppress your intuition, right? Specifically in these scenarios where there's like a social obligation to maintain the friendship or the relationship, can you tell the truth or do you have to tell the social version of the truth? Do you have to withhold your intuitive truth in order to not offend that person? Most relationships are like that in my experience, but certain relationships, ascend to the level of truth relationship where the priority is actually awakening. The priority is growth. The priority is healing. This is very rare, but if you find those relationships, then you can call your friend out on their bullshit. You can tell your friend how they're perpetuating their suffering. You can say exactly how you feel. And if both people acknowledge that there's no ego, nobody's ego is trying to be right. It's not a question of right or wrong. It's a question of we both are seeking the truth. Then anything can be said. And that's a very beautiful and enlightened relationship. But it's extremely rare. And if you're not in a truth relationship with that friend, and if your intuition is not pulling you to try to build towards a truth relationship, then you need to, protect yourself, and you need to protect your own energy, and you need to, in the present moment, consult your intuitive heart. What is your intuitive heart telling you to do? Because, right, like as Ram Dass said, not every relationship has a license for truth. So if this particular relationship does not have a license for truth, then it's okay to protect your energy, right? And again, where I'm at, coddling the ego of another human being, there's nothing in me that thinks that is helpful for someone, even though it might feel comfortable for them in that moment. If someone is coming to me and they are looking for their ego to be validated, if they are looking for their ego to be coddled or comforted, I cannot participate in that, because when I listen to my dharma, my heart tells me that that is not helpful for that person. My heart tells me that what is helpful for all beings is the complete truth. But if that truth is going to be threatening to their ego, and if they're not ready to hear it, if they're not asking to hear it, and if their ego is prepared to try to drag me down when I share that truth, I'm going to be quiet and I'm going to protect my energy. And occasionally there are those rare and beautiful situations where you have a truth relationship for somebody, and when they come to you for help, they're not just looking for their ego to get coddled. They're actually coming to you because they want to find the truth with you, and they see you as someone who will tell the truth, so they're coming to you to hear it like it is, but that's very rare. And it's not selfish to protect your energy. It's not selfish, right? As a former people pleaser, I can't remember where I heard this. I think it was in The Artist's Way. Whenever the word selfish comes up, whether it's in your own head or if someone else is accusing you of being selfish, that is a red alert word. That should be throwing red flags to your intuition that someone is trying to control you for their own benefit, right? We don't owe anybody anything if our cup is not full, right? Our service to others comes from an overflowing cup of love. So if our ego is calculating that we need to help someone, but it's draining us and pulling us down, that's not who we're supposed to be helping. And that's not selfish. That's actually tuning in to your intuition, to your dharma, to the universe's plan for you. The universe knows where you're going to be the most helpful to the world, and you have to listen to it. You have to get your ego out of the way, and you do that by making sure your own cup is full, right? You don't have to put yourself down to help others. There's a way to help others in a way that is actually energizing to you. And it's okay, and it's not selfish to wait for those circumstances. And it's okay to prioritize your own journey, right? It's that cliche thing. Hurt people, right? You have to prioritize your own healing. When you are healed, when you are whole, your service to others is going to be of a tremendous impact. When you're a hurt person, but your ego is telling you that you have to help others in these particular ways, your ego has no idea what it's talking about. Try to drop it. Try to surrender to your intuition. Your intuition is going to guide you. Your intuition will guide you towards your true service to humanity. And like I said during the discussion about goals, let go of how your service to humanity is going to look specifically. That's how we get trapped. Be open to how it may look, right? Your service to humanity Osho speaks a lot about how, like, yeah, you could call the Buddha selfish because all he did was sit and meditate under a tree all day. But that's just other egos deciding that that is selfish. Well, in actuality, the Buddha sitting under the tree and meditating sent reverberations throughout the world that are still unfolding, right? I'm having an awakening thanks to the Buddha sitting under that tree. If the Buddha was in his ego, thinking that he needed to spend his life feeding people, he would not have served in the way that he was meant to serve. Right? So drop the specific idea of how your helpfulness or how your service is supposed to look. This is a big Ram Dass idea. And allow your service to come out through your intuition. If you do that, your service is going to be something that is actually fueling to you. All right. It's always interesting to see what comes out during these episodes. I hope you found some of this enlightening, helpful on your journey in some way. I greatly appreciate sharing this presence and this inquiry with you all. Godspeed on your journey forward. I'll see you next week.